On Monday, Fran and I and Edward got back from Disneyland on what might have been our best family holiday ever. And not because of the brilliance of Disneyland, which is brilliant, but because of the new terms of engagement that we brought for the first time to our holiday family way. Over the summer, I realized we always go to Penticton, sit around a pool, drink drinks with little umbrellas in it, and chill. And Edward, for many years, has just loved swimming in the pool. But this summer, he kind of ran out of interest about 10 days into that holiday, and it kind of struck me that maybe he needs a holiday that he would like, and maybe you got to quit going where you like to go, John and Fran, and go where Edward might want to go. What if we did a holiday on Edward's terms? And so we did. The location was chosen for him, the schedule was chosen for him, and most of the choices were made by Edward, except for not having cheeseburgers and fries at every meal on the holiday. We stopped in Disneyland wherever there was music. The music is everything and all that mattered for Eddie there. We exited rides at the last minute after waiting for 45 minutes in a lineup. You get to the front, you're about to, no, okay. And they walked against the tide and exited the ride. We left the park after 3 hours on the second day because he was so exhausted from the first day, which, the Dutch guy in me, we're staying for every penny's worth of this. And then on the third day, this was the adaption, knowing that he wanted to see so much more than his legs would allow him to get to see, we rented a wheelchair and pushed him around the whole time. So he's having a great time. I am dying, okay? Over 200 pounds for 8 hours, pushing it through the park was a stretch. What made it great, that holiday, was that everything we did in submission to his needs and where he was at. And ironically, but not ironically, as I've processed it this week, we ended up having the best holiday of our lives in doing that for him. We flourished when he flourished. Conversing with two development worker types this week, Peter Timmerman, who heads up our project, Malawi project, Ubuntu project, and many more in Malawi, with an organization called World Renew, and Jeff Loomis, who's a member of New Hope and heads up or is in leadership at an organization called Momentum here in the city, both doing development work, one in Calgary, one in Malawi. Talking to them, I realized this is why they do what they do. They find life in bringing life to other people. They are restored and made new in the restoring and making new of others. They become more fully human when they enable another person to find their dignity and become more fully human. And in all of those ways and more, they image God when they do and are who they are in those capacities. Peter Timmerman defines a development worker this way. I would say that a good development worker is a person who sees what is broken or unfulfilled in this world and works to make it better. That's simple. God's heart. Defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. Wicked individuals or systems or human natures that denigrate and marginalize and hurt and don't make room and hog. And the way development workers do their work is similar in one very great way to God's way. Jeff says the purpose of community development is to work with. It's not a charity. To work with often disadvantaged people in communities as opposed to providing service to or doing for, charity type stuff, to improve economic, social, and environmental conditions. Development workers come alongside They don't impose or coerce or force change upon somebody who needs help. They don't overpower others when they're doing their job right, sticking to their values. They work humbly and see others, those they help, as being no worse, no better, as being like them. The Apostle Paul to the Philippian church: don't push your way to the front. Don't sweet talk your way to the top. Put yourself aside and help others get ahead. Don't be obsessed with getting your own advantage. Getting your own advantage, city Calgarians, you and I. Forget yourself long enough to lend a helping hand. Think of yourself the way Christ Jesus thought of himself. He had equal status with God, but didn't think so much of himself that he had to cling to the advantages of that status, no matter what. Development workers innately get that they don't have to cling to advantages that some of us cling to, unknowingly or not, that you can let go of some of that, and it's actually a good thing. He had equal status with God, but didn't think so much of himself that he had to cling to his advantages, to the advantages of that status no matter what. Not at all. When the time came, he set aside the privileges of deity and took on the status of a slave and became human. Having become human, he stayed human. It was an incredibly humbling process. He didn't claim special privileges. Instead, he lived a selfless, obedient life and then died a selfless, obedient death, and the worst kind of death at that, a crucifixion. Because of that obedience, God lifted him high and honored him. And he was more human than we can imagine. Seeing our brokenness, God, I'm sure, feels that's wrong. It's wrong that we live in a world where the crap that happens to people in this city happens, or that entire countries and people groups are disadvantaged as a result of a long history of Western intervention and pulling back and leaving messes, or because of droughts or floods or difficulties of their land, or because of bad histories and bad leaders and dictatorships. That is wrong, God says. And God's answer is to come to us in the brokenness, spend time with us in the mess, listen to us as we cry out and try to figure it out and find our way. Listen to us because he respects us, because he made us, and there's a dignity in us that even if we can't see it or others can't see it, he can see in you, in them, in us. Not coerce you, but instead walk beside you and walk in your shoes and meet you where you're at. That is God's way of saving and loving. So one of our core values from Ubuntu before we even started was that not only were we going to do the standard thing of sending people from our community into their community to help, but in order to counter the propensity to make that a power encounter, that we have all the answers and we're going to bring them to you, we're going to also make part of the communal arrangement that you fly to us. We arrange for you to fly to us and you be with us and we learn from you. And it's a real conversation. Jeff said to me this week that one of his greatest joys in doing his work, trying to unpack who he is, and he shares a story. He says, I discovered that my son is in the same daycare as one of the women who is part of the program that I help the organization offer. Son is in. And his delight in what is so just right about that story tells you something about a development worker's heart. Peter Timmerman's most numinous moment. And I'm going to read what he wrote to me from Malawi. Ironically, one of my significant moments in development came on a dark, starry night at the bottom of the Rift Valley in the center of Tanzania at a time when I was not really doing development work. How can you not want to listen to that story, You're already in the Rift Valley. I was spending the night with a group of Maasai with whom I had been working for the past 2 years. We were returning from a traditional ceremony, and I was on the back of one of the chief's bicycles. It was quiet, and there were about 15 of us men. There's just something magical and surreal about coasting through the African savanna with a group of Maasai warriors. It had been a difficult 2 years for me, but suddenly I realized that sense of belonging that now exists in traditional and remote, only exists in traditional and remote African villages. I quite literally and quite suddenly felt at one with this group of men, and I realized how strong their own sense of belonging to each other was. This connectedness is what development is all about. People are connected locally, but they're also connected globally. And sure, it's corny and a bit of a cliche, but in that moment of understanding, both belonging and broader connectedness, after 2 years of development sweat, I realized I was made to better understand how actions and reactions globally continually affect everyone on this planet, and that our work is to help communities of the poor and the powerful to realize all of this connectedness. So Jeff shows me the programs and the people they work with and some of the disadvantaged and the marginalized that they help. But he also tells me that the seat I'm sitting in their cafeteria is where the CEO of Imperial Oil sat. And it's a conversion and a renewal and a restoring of life and heart and humanity in 2 directions. Have you ever considered that God, the greatest development worker imaginable, feels the kinds of things just described in the hearts of those development workers toward you? So happy and insistent that you enter into his community, into his hospitality to see where he lives, that he'd even go so far as to pay for the flight for you to get there. Our Heavenly Father, filled with delight that his Son could travel and journey with us, with you, with us, on this earth for a time, for this time. God delighting in the oneness that he experiences when being with you on your earthly journey, the oneness that God feels, the joy that God feels to be with you as he comes alongside you. Of course, God feels all of that. That's what he's like. Psalm 103, the Lord works righteousness and justice for all the oppressed. The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear, who know him, who have faith in him, who trust him, who reverence him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear, have faith in him. For he knows how we are formed, and he remembers that we are dust.